The crystalline spires of New Windsor Station gleamed against the backdrop of Earth's blue marble, suspended in the void like a crown jewel of human engineering. Admiral Charles Thornton stood before the massive observation deck, watching as the German Federation's flagship approached through the asteroid field that had once been the moon. The lunar mining operations had transformed humanity's oldest satellite into a scattered ring of resources. But today, those floating chunks of rock served as a dramatic backdrop for the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. "Admiral, the Teutonic Pride is requesting docking clearance at Bay 7, reported Lieutenant Sarah Chen from her station. Her voice carried the slight tremor that had affected the entire crew since they'd learned about their visitors. Not the German delegation, they were fellow humans after all, but the others who would be watching. Charles adjusted his ceremonial uniform, the same deep blue that British naval officers had worn for centuries, though now it bore the insignia of the Terran Royal Navy. The irony wasn't lost on him that humanity's oldest monarchy was now serving as the diplomatic face for their entire species. When the Galactic Consortium had first made contact 3 months ago, they'd been confused by Earth's fractured political landscape. The idea of multiple sovereign nations on a single world was apparently so bizarre that most alien species couldn't comprehend it. "The humans have no unity," the Zephyrian ambassador had observed during the first contact protocols. "How can such a divided species have achieved faster-than-light travel?" It was King William who had provided the answer that changed everything. "We are not divided by our governments," he had said, standing in the rebuilt Westminster Palace before a gathering of alien diplomats. "We are united by our humanity. Our diversity is our strength, not our weakness." Now Charles found himself hosting the most elaborate state dinner in human history, and the guest list read like something from a science fiction novel. The German Federation president would arrive first, followed by representatives from every major Earth nation. But they would all be under the watchful eyes of the Galactic Consortium, whose members were still deciding whether humanity deserved a seat at the cosmic table. The docking clamps engaged with a satisfying thunk that resonated through the station's superstructure. Charles had overseen the construction of New Windsor Station personally, ensuring that every detail reflected both human technological achievement and the diplomatic traditions that had kept Earth's nations from destroying each other for the past century. The station's design incorporated elements from Windsor Castle, but reimagined for zero gravity and the harsh environment of space. "Dr. Weber, the German president's science advisor, is aboard the first shuttle," Chen reported. "She's requesting permission to conduct preliminary scans of our defensive systems." Charles smiled. Trust the Germans to focus on technical specifications even during a diplomatic visit. Grant her access to the public areas, but keep the quantum torpedo bays classified. We want to appear strong, not threatening. The lift doors whispered open, and Charles turned to greet his first guest. Dr. Alina Weber emerged, her silver hair perfectly arranged despite the journey from Earth's surface. She wore the deep red uniform of the German Space Corps, and her eyes immediately began cataloging every detail of the station's construction. "Admiral Thornton," she said, extending her hand. "President Mueller sends his regards and his gratitude for hosting this gathering." "The pleasure is ours, Dr. Weber. How was your journey?" "Fascinating," she replied, pulling out a small scanning device. "Your station's gravitational manipulation system is quite impressive. The artificial gravity feels completely natural, even at this distance from any planetary body." Charles gestured toward the observation deck. "We've had excellent teachers. The captured Krillian technology from the Beta Centauri incident proved most illuminating." Dr. Weber's eyebrows rose. "Ah, yes, the incident where a single human cargo vessel disabled an entire Krillian battlecruiser using nothing but creative engineering and determination. The consortium is still debating whether that was luck or skill." "I prefer to think of it as human ingenuity," Charles said. "Captain Martinez saw a problem that needed solving and found a way to solve it. The fact that his solution involved using the enemy's own gravitational weapons against them was simply efficient." Through the massive viewport, more ships were approaching. Charles could see the sleek lines of the French diplomatic cruiser Liberté, the angular efficiency of the Japanese vessel Harmony, and the massive bulk of the American battleship Constitution. Each nation had insisted on providing their own transport, another display of the diversity that so puzzled the alien observers. "Admiral," Chen called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the consortium observation ship." Charles nodded to Dr. Weber. "Excuse me for a moment." He moved to the communication station, where a holographic display flickered to life. The image resolved into the elongated features of Ambassador Thys, the Zephyrian representative who served as the consortium's primary liaison with humanity. "Admiral Thornton," Thys said, his translated voice carrying the typical flat intonation of the universal translator. "The Consortium Council wishes to observe your gathering with interest. We understand this is what humans call a state banquet." "That's correct, Ambassador. We're honored by your interest in our diplomatic traditions." Thys's large, dark eyes blinked slowly. "We find it curious that humans would combine the consumption of nutrients with political discourse. Most civilized species separate these functions entirely." Charles smiled diplomatically. "Food sharing is one of humanity's oldest bonding rituals, Ambassador. We've found that breaking bread together builds trust and understanding in ways that formal negotiations cannot." "We shall observe with great interest," Thys said. "The Council is particularly curious about your species' ability to maintain cooperation despite significant cultural and political differences." The transmission ended, and Charles turned back to Dr. Weber, who had been listening with obvious interest. "The aliens still don't understand us," she observed. "Perhaps that's for the best," Charles replied. "Unpredictability can be a valuable asset in diplomacy." The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of arrivals and formal greetings. President Mueller arrived aboard his personal shuttle, a man in his 60s whose reputation for brilliant strategic thinking had made him one of Earth's most respected leaders. The French delegation came with their usual flair for drama, while the Japanese representatives brought gifts of traditional craftsmanship adapted for space environments. But it was the arrival of the final guest that truly demonstrated humanity's unique approach to diplomacy. King William himself had insisted on attending, despite the security risks of having the constitutional monarch travel so far from Earth. His shuttle, smaller and less ostentatious than the others, docked quietly at Bay 1. Charles was waiting in the reception area when the king emerged. Despite being well into his 70s, William moved with the confidence of a man who had seen his nation and his planet survive the transition to a spacefaring civilization. He wore the simple uniform of the Royal Space Service, with only the crown insignia on his collar to mark his rank. "Your Majesty," Charles said, offering a formal bow. "None of that, Admiral," William said with a warm smile. "We're all humans here, representing our species to beings who see us as barely more than clever animals. Today, we show them what human civilization truly means." As the group moved toward the main banquet hall, Charles caught sight of the consortium observation ship through a porthole. The alien vessel maintained a respectful distance, but its sensor arrays were clearly focused on the station. Every word, every gesture, every human interaction was being recorded and analyzed by beings whose understanding of social dynamics was purely theoretical. The banquet hall itself was a masterpiece of human engineering and artistry. The walls displayed a rotating series of images from Earth, not just the rebuilt cities and restored ecosystems, but the everyday moments that defined human life. Children playing in parks on Mars, families gathering for meals aboard generation ships, workers collaborating on orbital construction projects. The images showed humanity not as conquerors or warriors, but as builders, creators, and nurturers. President Mueller paused before one image that showed a mixed group of children from different Earth nations playing together in a lunar playground. "This is what we're really fighting for," he said quietly. "Not territory or resources, but the right to remain human in a galaxy that doesn't understand what that means." The formal dinner would begin in an hour, but Charles could already sense that something important was happening. The human delegates weren't just representing their individual nations. They were unconsciously demonstrating the cooperative spirit that had allowed humanity to colonize dozens of worlds in just 50 years since achieving faster-than-light travel. Dr. Weber had connected her tablet to the station's central computer and was sharing German terraforming data with her Japanese colleagues. The French delegation was discussing artistic exchanges with the British cultural attaché. Even the typically reserved American military advisors were engaged in animated conversations about joint defense strategies with their European counterparts. "Admiral," Chen reported, "we're detecting increased sensor activity from the consortium ship. They're recording everything. Charles nodded, but he wasn't concerned. Let them record. Let them try to understand how a species that had spent most of its history fighting internal wars had managed to unite when faced with the vast challenges of space exploration. The answer wasn't in their technology or their military might. It was in moments like this, when humans chose cooperation over competition, understanding over suspicion. King William appeared at his elbow, having moved through the gathering with the easy grace of a lifetime diplomat. "The consortium representatives seem quite interested in our little gathering," he observed. "They're trying to figure out how we manage to work together despite our differences," Charles replied. "I don't think they realize that our differences are actually the secret to our success." "Perhaps it's time we showed them," William said. "Shall we begin?" Charles nodded and moved to the center of the hall. The conversations gradually died down as the human representatives turned their attention to their host. Through the viewport, the consortium observation ship maintained its vigil, alien minds trying to comprehend the mystery of human cooperation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Charles began, his voice carrying clearly in the perfect acoustics of the hall, "we gather today not just as representatives of Earth's nations, but as ambassadors for our entire species. What we do here, how we conduct ourselves, will help determine humanity's place in the galactic community." He paused, looking around at the faces of some of the most brilliant and dedicated humans alive. "But we are not here to pretend to be something we're not. We are here to show the galaxy what humanity truly is: diverse, creative, and united in our commitment to building a better future for all." As the formal ceremonies began, Charles couldn't help but feel a surge of pride in his species. They might be young compared to the ancient civilizations of the Galactic Consortium, but humanity had something that age and technology couldn't provide: the ability to find unity in diversity, strength in cooperation, and hope in the face of an uncertain future. The main banquet hall of New Windsor Station transformed as the evening progressed, becoming a stage where humanity performed its greatest act of diplomacy. The crystalline walls had been programmed to display a slowly rotating view of Earth as seen from lunar orbit, but tonight the planet appeared different than it had for centuries. The scars of the resource wars had been healed. The dead zones from the climate crisis had bloomed again, and the lights of rebuilt cities sparkled like jewels across the continents. President Klaus Müller of the German Federation found himself seated between King William and Admiral Thornton, a positioning that had been carefully calculated to demonstrate the seamless cooperation between Earth's oldest monarchy and its newest republic. The seating arrangement itself told a story that the watching consortium observers were trying desperately to decode. How could representatives of historically antagonistic nations share a meal without the threat of violence? "Your Majesty," Müller said, raising his glass of genuine earth wine, "I propose a toast to the ingenuity that brought us together tonight. 300 years ago, our ancestors were locked in conflicts that nearly destroyed our world. Today, we dine among the stars, united in purpose." King William smiled, his weathered face reflecting decades of leadership through humanity's greatest transformation. "To President Müller, and to the reminder that progress is always possible when good people choose cooperation over conflict." The toast rippled through the hall, but what caught Admiral Thornton's attention was the reaction from the consortium observation ship. The alien vessel's sensor readings spiked dramatically as they detected the complex emotional resonances in the room: joy, hope, determination, and something else that their technology couldn't quite categorize. What they were sensing, though they didn't know it, was the uniquely human ability to transform former enemies into trusted allies. Dr. Alina Weber, who had been quietly recording everything for the German archives, leaned forward to address the Japanese delegation at the neighboring table. "Dr. Nakamura, your recent work on quantum agricultural systems has caught our attention. We believe there might be opportunities for collaboration in the Kepler 442 system." Dr. Yuki Nakamura, a slight woman whose brilliant engineering mind had designed the atmospheric processors that made life possible on a dozen worlds, nodded enthusiastically. "The soil composition reports from Kepler 442b suggest our bioregeneration techniques would work well there. But we would need German expertise in underground hydroponic systems for the initial phases." This was exactly what Charles had hoped to see, not just diplomatic pleasantries, but genuine technical cooperation being born over dinner conversation. The human delegates weren't just representing their nations. They were unconsciously weaving the fabric of humanity's future expansion among the stars. "Admiral," Lieutenant Chen's voice whispered through his discreet earpiece, "we're getting some interesting readings from the consortium ship. Their behavioral analysis computers appear to be overloading." Charles suppressed a smile. The aliens were trying to understand human social dynamics using purely logical frameworks, but human behavior was often beautifully illogical. The fact that former adversaries could become close allies, that competition could coexist with cooperation, that diversity could create strength rather than weakness. These concepts challenged every assumption the consortium had about how intelligent species should organize themselves. The formal service began with what Charles had privately termed the demonstration of abundance. Rather than the simple nutrition blocks that most spacefaring species consumed, the human meal showcased the incredible diversity of Earth's culinary traditions, adapted for space consumption but retaining their essential character. Each course told a story of human creativity and resourcefulness. The first course featured what appeared to be simple appetizers, but each small portion represented a triumph of food science. Genuine French cheese that had been aged in the low gravity of Lunar Station Alpha, where the reduced pressure created unique flavors impossible to achieve on Earth. German sausages made from livestock raised in the artificial biomes of Europa Station, where careful genetic management had produced meat with enhanced nutritional profiles. British delicacies that incorporated spices from the vertical farms of New Singapore Station, proving that human agricultural innovation had not only survived the transition to space, but flourished. What the consortium observers couldn't understand was why humans would spend so much effort on food preparation when efficient nutrition could be achieved through simple chemical combinations. They missed the deeper meaning, that the sharing of food was an act of trust, a demonstration that humans valued not just survival but quality of life, not just efficiency but beauty. President Mueller found himself explaining this concept to his table companions, unaware that his words were being transmitted directly to the consortium analysis computers. "My grandmother used to say that you can tell everything about a people by how they feed their guests," he said, savoring a delicate bite of what appeared to be traditional German strudel, but had been enhanced with nutrients from asteroid mining operations. "When we share our best food, we share our culture, our history, our hopes for the future." King William nodded approvingly. "In Britain, we have a saying, the way to peace is through a full stomach and an open heart." This meal isn't just about nutrition, it's about building the trust that will carry humanity through the challenges ahead. The second course showcased humanity's adaptability in ways that had the consortium computers working overtime. Traditional dishes from every Earth culture had been reimagined for space consumption, but the essential flavors and cultural significance remained intact. Italian pasta made from protein-rich algae cultivated in orbital farms. Indian curry spices that had been enhanced through careful genetic modification to provide additional health benefits in low-gravity environments. Chinese preparations that demonstrated how traditional cooking techniques could be adapted to closed-system food production. Dr. Weber was deep in conversation with the American delegation about agricultural cooperation in the Tau Ceti system when she noticed something that made her pause. The French cultural attaché was teaching a traditional folk song to a group of children who were visiting the station with their parents, workers' families from various nations who lived aboard the massive space installations that made human expansion possible. "This is what the aliens don't understand," she murmured to Admiral Thornton. "They see our political divisions and assume we're weak, but they miss the connections that truly matter. Those children are learning songs from cultures that aren't their own, not because they have to, but because it brings them joy." Charles followed her gaze and saw exactly what she meant. The children represented every major human ethnicity and several that had emerged during humanity's expansion into space. The pale, elongated features of those born on Luna, the enhanced bone density of Mars-born children, the adapted respiratory systems of those raised on high-altitude orbital platforms. Yet they sang together with the unconscious harmony that only children could achieve, their voices creating something beautiful from the diversity of their backgrounds. "Admiral Thornton," came Ambassador Thiss's voice through the communication system, "the Consortium Council requests clarification on what we are observing. Our behavioral analysts indicate that the human juveniles are engaging in cultural activities that do not correspond to their genetic lineages. This appears to be a form of cultural contamination that should cause social instability, yet our sensors detect no conflict patterns. Charles activated his personal communicator, ensuring his response would be recorded by the consortium observers. Ambassador, what you're witnessing is one of humanity's greatest strengths. We share culture freely, adopting and adapting traditions that strengthen our communities. Those children are learning that diversity creates beauty, not conflict. This concept does not correlate with our understanding of species development, This replied. Most civilizations maintain strict cultural boundaries to preserve social stability. Perhaps that's why most civilizations remain confined to their home systems, Charles suggested gently. Human culture is like our cuisine. It becomes richer and more nourishing when different traditions combine. The main course of the banquet featured a centerpiece that had required months of preparation and demonstrated humanity's most impressive achievement, the ability to maintain Earth-like conditions anywhere in the galaxy. The roasted meats came from animals raised in perfect replicas of their natural environments, but those environments existed inside massive space habitats orbiting distant stars. The vegetables had been grown in soil that was literally created from asteroids and comets, transformed through human ingenuity into life-supporting Earth. President Mueller was explaining the philosophical implications to King William when Dr. Nakamura interrupted with an observation that would change the course of human consortium relations. Your Majesty, President Mueller, I believe we should share something with our observers. They're analyzing our cooperation through the lens of political necessity, but they're missing the emotional component that makes it possible. She stood gracefully, and her action gradually drew the attention of the entire hall. Ladies and gentlemen, we are being watched by representatives of species that have achieved technological marvels we can barely imagine. They travel between stars as easily as we once sailed between continents. They have conquered disease, extended their lifespans, and created perfect social orders. Dr. Nakamura paused, looking around at the faces of her fellow humans. But they have also lost something that we have preserved. They have forgotten how to hope, how to dream, how to find joy in the simple act of sharing a meal with friends who were once strangers. The hall fell silent, but it was the silence of attention, not discomfort. Through the viewports, the consortium observation ship continued its vigil, its sensors recording every word. When the first consortium ships arrived at Earth, Nakamura continued, their computers analyzed our technological level and concluded we were too primitive for contact. They missed what truly matters, not the sophistication of our machines, but the sophistication of our hearts. She gestured toward the mixed group of children, who had finished their song and were now sharing desserts that their parents had brought from a dozen different worlds. Those children don't see humans from different nations or different planets. They see friends. That simple ability to form connections across any boundary is what has allowed us to build a civilization that spans the stars in just 50 years. King William rose slowly, his movement drawing every eye in the hall. Dr. Nakamura speaks truth that resonates across generations. When I was young, the idea of Germans and British, French and Americans, Japanese and Indians sharing a meal in peace seemed impossible. The wounds of history ran too deep. His voice carried the weight of decades, but also the hope that had sustained him through humanity's greatest transformation. Yet here we are, not because we were forced to cooperate, but because we chose to see the possibilities instead of the obstacles. We chose hope over fear, unity over division, creation over destruction. The British monarch's words were being transmitted in real time to the consortium council chambers, where beings from 100 different worlds were struggling to understand how such a young species could display such mature wisdom. Their own histories were filled with conquest and domination, of strong species absorbing weak ones, until only the most efficient civilizations remained. But humanity was showing them something different, a model of civilization based not on the elimination of differences, but on the celebration of diversity. The consortium computers had no algorithms for analyzing a species that grew stronger through internal variety rather than weaker through internal conflict. The dessert course arrived as the conversation reached its most profound depths, but even the sweets told stories that would have impressed the most sophisticated galactic anthropologists. Each delicate creation represented not just culinary skill, but humanity's refusal to abandon beauty in favor of mere efficiency. The chocolate sculptures incorporated cocoa beans from Earth, but the sugar came from processing centers on Jupiter's moons, and the decorative elements were crafted from edible flowers grown in the orbital gardens of New Geneva Station. Admiral Thornton watched President Mueller examine a dessert that appeared to be a perfect miniature reproduction of the Brandenburg Gate, complete with tiny figures representing citizens from a dozen different worlds. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. The gate that had once divided a city now served as a sweet reminder of barriers that had been overcome through patience and hope. "This is remarkable craftsmanship," Mueller said, holding up the delicate sugar sculpture. "Who created these pieces?" "A collaborative effort," replied Chef Patricia O'Connor, the Irish master chef who supervised New Windsor Station's kitchen facilities. "The chocolate work was done by artisans from the Luna City Culinary Institute, which includes students from 47 different Earth nations and 12 off-world colonies. The sugar artistry came from the asteroid mining platforms, where workers developed incredible precision working in zero gravity. And the flavor profiles were designed by the Agricultural Council's taste specialists, ensuring that every element would be familiar and comforting to humans from any cultural background." Dr. Weber leaned forward with interest. "You're describing industrial collaboration that spans the entire solar system, all focused on creating something that will be consumed and gone within minutes. The consortium observers must find this bewildering." "Let them be bewildered," said King William with a gentle smile. "Some things can't be understood through analysis alone. Beauty, joy, the simple pleasure of sharing something wonderful with friends, these require experience, not explanation." As if summoned by the king's words, the holographic communication system activated, and Ambassador Thiss appeared in the center of the hall. His elongated form and large, dark eyes immediately drew every human's attention, but what was remarkable was how quickly the tension that should have accompanied such an interruption simply evaporated. Humans, it seemed, had an unlimited capacity for treating the extraordinary as merely interesting. "Honored humans," Thiss said, his translated voice carrying undertones that the universal translator couldn't quite capture. "The Consortium Council has requested that I pose a direct question to your gathering." "Please, Ambassador," Admiral Thornton replied formally, "we are honored by the Council's interest." "We have observed your interactions with great attention," Thiss continued. "Our analysis indicates that you represent multiple competing political entities, yet you demonstrate cooperation patterns that suggest unified social organization. Our computers cannot resolve this contradiction. How do you maintain stability while preserving what you term diversity?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and Charles could sense the weight of it. This wasn't just curiosity, this was a test. The consortium's decision about humanity's membership would likely depend on how well they could explain their unique approach to civilization. It was Dr. Nakamura who answered first, her clear voice carrying the confidence of someone who had spent her life solving impossible problems. "Ambassador, I believe your computers are programmed to see diversity as inefficiency, but they're missing the adaptive advantages it provides. When we face new challenges, we can draw solutions from hundreds of different cultural and intellectual traditions." "Clarification requested," Thiss responded. "Provide specific example of diversity creating advantage rather than inefficiency." President Mueller gestured to the group gathered around them. 3 years ago, when the Rigel colony faced the soil contamination crisis, no single nation had a complete solution. British atmospheric processing technology, German underground agriculture systems, Japanese bioremediation techniques, and American water purification methods had to be combined to save 2 million colonists. "Each approach alone would have failed," added Dr. Weber. "But together, they created a solution that was better than anything any of us could have developed independently." Thiss's large eyes blinked slowly, a gesture that humans had learned indicated deep thought in his species. "This suggests that inefficiency in organization creates efficiency in problem-solving. The concept is paradoxical." "Perhaps," said King William, rising slowly to address the alien ambassador, "the mistake is in assuming that there is only one correct way to organize intelligent beings. The consortium represents the endpoint of civilizations that chose unity through conformity. Humanity represents an experiment in unity through diversity." The monarch's words created a ripple of understanding through the hall that was almost visible. Charles could see it in the way the human delegates straightened slightly, in the way their conversations took on a more focused quality. They were beginning to realize that this dinner was more than a diplomatic gesture. It was humanity's audition for membership in galactic civilization. Your Majesty raises an interesting point, Thys said. The consortium has indeed eliminated most forms of internal variation in member species. Social stability increased dramatically when cultural differences were minimized. But at what cost? Asked Dr. O'Connor, surprising everyone by joining the conversation from where she had been quietly observing. Forgive my directness, Ambassador, but in our experience, eliminating cultural differences also eliminates cultural innovation. How do your people create new solutions to unprecedented problems? Through logical analysis and computational modeling, Thys replied immediately. And when those methods fail? The pause that followed was telling. Through the communication link, Charles could hear what sounded like multiple conversations in alien languages, as if Thys was consulting with unseen advisors. When standard approaches prove insufficient, Thys finally said, the situation is classified as requiring additional study time until adequate solutions can be computed. The humans exchanged glances that spoke volumes. What Thys was describing was exactly the kind of bureaucratic paralysis that had nearly destroyed Earth's environment before the climate accords forced revolutionary changes in human thinking. Ambassador, said Admiral Thornton carefully, how long did it take your people to develop faster-than-light travel? Approximately 12,000 of your years, from the first theoretical frameworks to practical implementation. Humanity achieved faster-than-light capability in less than 2 centuries from our first space flight, Dr. Weber said quietly. Our diversity meant that hundreds of different research groups were pursuing hundreds of different approaches simultaneously. When the breakthrough came, it came from combining insights that no single approach would have produced. The implications of this comparison settled over the hall like a revelation. The consortium species had achieved technological marvels through patient, methodical development over millennia. Humanity had achieved comparable results through chaotic, creative innovation in a fraction of the time. This explains several anomalous observations, Thys admitted. Consortium scouts have reported that human technological development appears to follow no logical pattern, with breakthrough innovations appearing unpredictably and spreading rapidly throughout your species. Because we share our discoveries, said President Mueller simply. When a German scientist makes a breakthrough, she doesn't keep it secret from the French or the Americans or the Japanese. We compete with each other, yes, but we also cooperate. Competition drives innovation, but cooperation ensures that innovations benefit everyone. King William nodded approvingly. The strength of the British monarchy has always been its ability to unite different peoples under common cause while preserving their distinct identities. Now, we see that same principle working on a galactic scale. Through the viewport, Charles could see that the consortium observation ship had been joined by several other vessels. Word of the human gathering was apparently spreading through the alien fleet, drawing observers who wanted to witness this unprecedented display of organized diversity. Admiral Thornton, Thys said, the Council requests permission to observe your gathering more closely. Additional ships are en route with behavioral specialists from 17 different consortium species. Charles looked around the hall, reading the faces of his fellow humans. He saw determination, curiosity, and something else, a quiet confidence that spoke to humanity's readiness for this moment. The permission is granted gladly, he replied. But I should warn you that human behavior becomes more interesting, not more predictable under observation. As if to prove his point, the children who had been singing earlier approached the holographic projection of Ambassador Thys with the fearless curiosity that only young humans possessed. Are you really an alien? Asked Maria Santos-Chen, a 7-year-old whose parents worked in the station's botanical research section. Her features showed the mixed heritage of the new humans being born among the stars, part Brazilian, part Chinese, part something entirely new that had emerged from humanity's expansion into space. Thys's large eyes focused on the small girl with what humans had learned to recognize as surprise. I am a representative of the Zephyrian species, native to the Epsilon Eridani system. From your perspective, yes, I am what you would term alien. You're very tall, observed Marcus Williams Patel, an 8-year-old whose British Indian ancestry was visible in his dark hair and light eyes. Do all your people look like you? We are more uniform in appearance than humans appear to be, Thys replied carefully. That's sad, said little Alina Kowalska-Johansson, whose Polish-Swedish parents worked in the station's engineering section. Different is interesting. Mama says that's why space is so exciting, because everything is different from everything else. The simplicity of the child's wisdom struck the adult humans like lightning. Here, in the innocent observations of children who had never known a world without diversity, lay the key to humanity's unique strength. They didn't see differences as problems to be solved, but as opportunities to be explored. Ambassador Thys stood silent for a long moment, his alien features unreadable to human observers. But when he spoke again, his voice carried new undertones that the universal translator struggled to convey. The Council will be most interested in these observations, he said. It appears that human developmental patterns differ significantly from those of established galactic species. As the formal dinner drew toward its close, Admiral Thornton realized that something profound had occurred. The evening had begun as a demonstration of human diplomatic capability, but it had evolved into something far more important, proof that humanity offered something the galaxy had never seen before. The after-dinner presentations began with what Admiral Thornton had privately termed the human exhibition, but what unfolded was far more than anyone had anticipated. The main hall of New Windsor Station had been reconfigured to showcase humanity's achievements, but instead of the typical displays of military might or technological superiority, the humans had chosen to demonstrate something far more profound, their capacity for collaborative creation. The first presentation came from Dr. Yuki Nakamura, whose holographic displays showed the terraforming progress on 17 different worlds. But what caught Ambassador Thys's attention wasn't the impressive speed of the environmental transformation. It was the way each world retained the distinctive cultural fingerprints of its colonizers while incorporating innovations from other human traditions. Kepler 442b shows fascinating development patterns, Dr. Nakamura explained, gesturing to aerial views of a planet where vast Germanic agricultural complexes existed alongside delicate Japanese garden cities and robust British industrial centers. Rather than imposing a single developmental model, we allowed each settlement group to design their communities according to their cultural preferences, then facilitated the sharing of successful innovations. The consortium observation ships had multiplied during the dinner, and now 17 different alien vessels maintained formation around New Windsor Station. Charles could see their scanning beams playing across the human installation, recording every detail of construction and operation. What they were learning would reshape their understanding of how a spacefaring civilization could organize itself. The most remarkable achievement, Dr. Nakamura continued, is the emergence of hybrid solutions that no single culture could have developed alone. The atmospheric processors on New Berlin incorporate British industrial efficiency, Japanese environmental sensitivity, and German engineering precision. The result is technology that surpasses anything any of our individual nations could have created. President Mueller rose to add context to the technical presentation. Dr. Nakamura's work demonstrates something the consortium may find difficult to understand, that competition and cooperation are not opposites, but complementary forces. German and Japanese teams compete fiercely to develop better terraforming techniques, but they also share their discoveries freely, knowing that human expansion benefits everyone. Through the communication link, Ambassador Thys could be heard consulting with unseen advisors in rapid exchanges of alien languages. When he finally responded, his translated voice carried what humans were learning to recognize as confusion. Honored humans, our analysis suggests that such sharing of technological advances should eliminate competitive advantages and reduce innovation incentives. Yet your developmental progress indicates accelerating rather than declining innovation rates. Please clarify this apparent contradiction. It was King William who provided the answer that would echo through consortium council chambers for generations to come. The British monarch rose slowly, his aged face bearing the wisdom of someone who had witnessed humanity's transformation from a planet-bound to a star-spanning civilization. Ambassador, the mistake in your analysis is the assumption that beings of intelligence compete only for material advantage, the king said. Humans compete for something far more valuable, the opportunity to contribute to our species' success. When a German engineer develops a better atmospheric processor, she gains the satisfaction of knowing that her innovation will help establish human colonies throughout the galaxy. That satisfaction is worth more than any exclusive technological advantage. Dr. Alina Weber activated her own presentation system, displaying construction images from the massive shipyards orbiting Jupiter. Our shipbuilding programs illustrate His Majesty's point perfectly. Every major human vessel is designed by international teams and built using resources from across the solar system. No single nation could construct ships like the ones that brought you here, but together, we've created a fleet that rivals anything in consortium space. The images showed vessels of breathtaking beauty and obvious power, not the purely functional designs that characterized most galactic shipping, but ships that incorporated artistic elements from every human culture. The sleek lines spoke of speed and efficiency, but the decorative elements revealed humanity's refusal to abandon beauty in favor of mere practicality. Each ship tells a story, Dr. Weber explained. The research vessel New Marco Polo incorporates design elements from every nation that participated in Earth's great age of exploration. The battleship Harmony bears artistic contributions from cultures that were once bitter enemies, now working together to protect human expansion. The hospital ship Mercy includes healing symbols from 200 different human traditions. What the consortium observers couldn't understand was why humans would spend resources on aesthetics when those resources could be directed toward functional improvements. Their own vessels were marvels of efficiency, but they were also stark, utilitarian constructions that served only their intended purposes. Beauty serves a purpose too, observed Chef O'Connor, who had joined the presentation to discuss how human food culture had adapted to space travel. When our colonists see ships that remind them of home, when they taste foods that connect them to their cultural heritage, they maintain the psychological health that allows them to function effectively in the harshest environments imaginable. The chef's presentation included images of hydroponic gardens aboard generation ships, where families from different cultures maintained plots that grew traditional crops, alongside experimental varieties developed for space agriculture. Children who had never seen Earth could still taste the foods their grandparents had shared, preserving cultural connections across the vast distances of space. The consortium approach emphasizes efficiency through standardization, Dr. Weber noted. But human experience suggests that diversity creates resilience. When the Tau Ceti colony faced the fungal contamination crisis, salvation came from a Scottish grandmother who remembered an old family recipe for antifungal treatments. Traditional knowledge, preserved through cultural diversity, provided the breakthrough that high-tech laboratory research had missed. Admiral Thornton could see that the alien observers were struggling with concepts that challenged their fundamental assumptions about how intelligent species should organize themselves. The consortium had achieved stability and efficiency by eliminating variables, but humans had achieved adaptability and innovation by embracing them. The evening's climactic presentation came from an unexpected source. The children who had been singing earlier approached the central display area with the confidence that only young humans possessed. What they showed the gathering would later be cited in consortium historical records as the moment when alien understanding of humanity began to shift fundamentally. "We made something for the aliens," announced Maria Santos-Chen, her 7-year-old voice carrying clearly through the hall's audio systems. "We wanted to show them what human kids can do when we work together." The children's creation was a holographic sculpture that appeared simple at first glance, a representation of the solar system with Earth at its center, surrounded by the colonies and stations where humans now lived. But as the display rotated, the complexity became apparent. Each world, each station, each orbital facility pulsed with different colors representing the cultural influences that had shaped their development. "The colors show where people's families came from," explained Marcus Williams Patel. "See, Mars Station has lots of blue because many British people went there, but it also has red for German people, and yellow for Chinese people, and green for African people, and purple for American people." Elena Kowalska-Johansson pointed to the outer colonies. "And look at the far places. They have colors we made up ourselves, because the people there are mixing up all the different colors from Earth and making new ones." The artistic sophistication was impressive, but what struck the adult observers was the conceptual framework the children had created. They had somehow grasped that human culture wasn't static, but constantly evolving, creating new combinations that enriched the whole while preserving the essential elements of the parts. The children understand something that our computers cannot calculate, Ambassador Thiss said, his translated voice carrying what humans were learning to recognize as wonder. They perceive cultural development as additive rather than competitive. Each new combination creates something valuable rather than destroying something essential. President Mueller knelt down to address the children at their own level. Can you tell the ambassador why you think different is good? Because different people know different things, Maria said with the unshakable logic of childhood. And when you put different things together, you get better things. Like Mama's Brazilian rice and Baba's Chinese vegetables, they taste better together than they do by themselves. The simplicity of the explanation masked profound wisdom that had taken humanity centuries to fully understand. The children, born into a diverse, spacefaring civilization, had internalized lessons that Earth's greatest philosophers had struggled to articulate. King William approached the children's display with the careful respect he might show to a work of art in the British Museum. "This is humanity's greatest achievement," he said quietly. "Not our ships or our technology or our military might, but our children's understanding that strength comes from unity, and unity comes from celebrating our differences." The communication channels crackled with increased activity as the consortium observation ships shared data and analysis. 17 different alien species were trying to process what they had witnessed, and their computers were generating contradictory conclusions that defied their understanding of social organization. Dr. Nakamura moved to stand beside the children's display, her adult perspective adding context to their intuitive wisdom. "What these children have shown you, Ambassador, is that human civilization doesn't follow the patterns your computers expect. We don't eliminate differences to create unity. We celebrate differences to create strength. This model creates variables that should produce instability," Thiss observed. "Yes," agreed Admiral Thornton, "but it also creates adaptability that allows us to thrive in environments where rigid systems would fail. Human colonies succeed in conditions that would challenge your established civilizations because we can draw solutions from hundreds of different traditions and thousands of different perspectives." The evening was drawing toward its formal conclusion, but Charles could sense that something fundamental had shifted in the relationship between humanity and the galactic consortium. The aliens had come expecting to evaluate whether humans were civilized enough for membership in their orderly galactic community. Instead, they were beginning to question whether their own approach to civilization might be missing something essential. The final hour of the state banquet began with an unprecedented event in galactic diplomatic history. Ambassador Thiss formally requested permission to temporarily deactivate the Universal Translator and speak directly to the human gathering in his own language. The request came not through official channels, but as a personal appeal to King William, delivered with the kind of hesitant respect that suggested something fundamental had changed in the aliens' understanding of humanity. "Your Majesty," Thiss said, his large eyes reflecting the station's lights in patterns that humans were learning indicated deep emotion, "my species has words that your universal translator cannot adequately convey. With your permission, I would speak them now, knowing that you may not understand the sounds, but hoping you will understand the intent." King William nodded gravely. "Permission granted gladly, Ambassador," sometimes meaning transcends language. What followed was a series of tonal patterns that seemed to flow like music through the hall's acoustic systems. The sounds were beautiful in ways that human ears could appreciate even without comprehension. Rising and falling cadences that spoke of wonder, questioning phrases that suggested curiosity, and underlying harmonies that conveyed something that might have been respect or gratitude. When the alien song concluded, the hall remained silent for a long moment. Then, spontaneously and without any orchestrated prompting, the human children began to hum along with a melody of their own, not copying what they had heard, but creating something that harmonized with it, building musical bridges across the vast gulf between species. "What my colleague has just expressed," came a new voice through the communication system, "requires context for human understanding." The speaker identified herself as Counselor Vess of the Altarian Collective, and her translated voice carried undertones of age and wisdom that commanded immediate respect. "Ambassador Thiss has just performed what we call the recognition. a formal acknowledgement that his people have encountered something unprecedented and worthy of profound respect. Admiral Thornton felt his pulse quicken. This was moving beyond diplomatic courtesy into territory that might reshape galactic civilization. "We are honored by the ambassador's recognition," he replied carefully. "Honor, Admiral Thornton, may be ours," Counselor Vess continued. "The Consortium Council has been monitoring your gathering with instruments far more sophisticated than simple observation devices. We have been measuring the quantum resonance patterns of human interaction, analyzing the neurochemical indicators of your emotional states, and modeling the complex social dynamics that allow your species to function as a cohesive unit despite maintaining individual and cultural distinctiveness." President Mueller exchanged glances with his fellow human leaders, recognizing that they were approaching a moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. "Our findings challenge fundamental assumptions about how intelligent species organize themselves," Counselor Vess said. "The Consortium achieved stability through what you might term convergent evolution. Member species gradually eliminated cultural and social variables that created conflict, resulting in highly efficient but ultimately predictable civilizations." Dr. Weber leaned forward intently. "And humanity represents a different approach." "Humanity represents something we believe to be theoretically impossible," the alien counselor replied. "You have achieved cooperative stability through what we must call divergent evolution. You become stronger and more adaptable by maintaining and celebrating differences that should create weakness and division." King William rose slowly, understanding that this moment required the gravitas that only constitutional monarchy could provide. "Counselor Vess, are you saying that the Consortium has reconsidered humanity's application for membership?" "Your Majesty, we are saying that the Consortium has reconsidered its own fundamental assumptions about the nature of civilization itself." The implications of this statement rippled through the hall like a shockwave. The humans had come to demonstrate their worthiness for admission to galactic civilization, but they were being told that they had instead challenged the galaxy's understanding of what civilization could be. "Explain, please," Admiral Thornton requested formally. "The Consortium represents 47 different species that achieved spaceflight and joined our collective over the past 50,000 years," Counselor Vess explained. "In every case, membership required the gradual elimination of internal diversity in favor of efficient social organization. We believed this was the natural progression of intelligent life." Dr. Nakamura stood to address the Alien Council directly. "But humanity suggests that diversity can be preserved while achieving unity." "Humanity suggests something far more profound," came a new voice, identified as Speaker Zenth of the Crystalline Assembly. "Your species appears to have discovered that diversity is not an obstacle to overcome in the pursuit of civilization, but rather the essential ingredient that makes true civilization possible." The children, who had been quietly listening to the adults' conversation, suddenly burst into excited chatter among themselves. Maria Santos-Chen tugged at Admiral Thornton's uniform sleeve. "Admiral, does this mean the aliens want to learn from us instead of just teaching us things?" Charles knelt down to the 7-year-old's level, struck by the simplicity of her question. "What makes you think that, Maria?" "Because that's what happens when you find someone who knows something you don't know," she replied with the unshakable logic of childhood. "You ask them to teach you." From the mouths of babes, Charles thought, rose the most profound truths. "The human child's observation is remarkably accurate," admitted Speaker Zenth. "The Consortium Council is formally requesting that humanity consider a mutual exchange program rather than simple membership admission." President Mueller felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. A mutual exchange program. Consortium species would learn from human diversity management techniques, Counselor Vess explained, while human colonies would benefit from technologies and knowledge accumulated over millennia of galactic civilization. But the exchange would be between equals, not between superior and subordinate civilizations. The offer was extraordinary, beyond anything humanity had dared hope for when first contact was established. But Admiral Thornton found himself hesitating, not from doubt about the opportunity, but from awareness of the responsibility it represented. "Counselor Vess," he said carefully, "such an arrangement would change both of our civilizations. Are you certain the Consortium understands what it's proposing?" Admiral, the consortium has spent 12 hours analyzing the social and cultural patterns demonstrated at your gathering tonight. Our computers have concluded that current consortium development has reached what your economists would call maximum efficiency, but at the cost of adaptive capability. Your species represents a model that prioritizes adaptability over efficiency, with results that our previous theories suggested should be impossible. Dr. Weber activated her personal recording device, understanding that she was witnessing a conversation that would be studied by historians for centuries to come. You're saying that our apparent weaknesses are actually strengths. We are saying that concepts we identified as weaknesses may be the key to capabilities we have lost, Speaker Zenth replied. Consortium species can solve known problems with unmatched efficiency, but we struggle with novel challenges that require creative solutions. Human colonies have thrived in environments that defeated our most sophisticated analytical approaches. King William moved to the center of the hall, his presence drawing every eye, human and alien alike. When he spoke, his words carried the authority of constitutional monarchy combined with the wisdom of personal experience, spanning humanity's greatest transformation. Counselor Vess, Speaker Zenth, Ambassador Thys, he said, humanity accepts your proposal, but with conditions that I believe you will find both reasonable and illuminating. The alien representatives waited in respectful silence. First, any exchange program must preserve the essential character of both human and consortium civilizations. We will not seek to impose our social models on your people, and we ask the same courtesy regarding your approaches to organization and efficiency. Agreed, came the immediate response from all three alien speakers. Second, the exchange must benefit not just our respective governments and institutions, but the ordinary citizens who represent the true strength of any civilization. Human families must be able to maintain their cultural identities while learning from galactic knowledge, and consortium individuals must be free to explore human diversity concepts without abandoning their own heritage. Also agreed. Third, and most importantly, this partnership must be built on the principle that has guided humanity's expansion among the stars. That strength comes from unity, and unity comes from celebrating rather than eliminating the differences that make each of us unique. The pause that followed stretched long enough for Charles to wonder if the alien representatives were consulting their respective governments. When the response finally came, it carried tones that the universal translator struggled to convey. Your Majesty, said Counselor Vess, the Consortium Council hereby formally recognizes humanity not as a candidate for membership, but as a founding partner in what we propose to call the Galactic Cooperative, a new form of interstellar civilization based on principles of unity through diversity rather than unity through conformity. The children in the hall began cheering before the adults fully processed the magnitude of what had just occurred. In the space of a single evening, a diplomatic dinner had transformed into the foundation of a new model for galactic civilization. As the formal ceremonies concluded and the participants began to disperse, Admiral Thornton found himself standing beside the massive viewport, watching as the consortium observation ships began to reconfigure their formations. Instead of the rigid geometric patterns that characterized their usual fleet arrangements, the alien vessels were beginning to experiment with more fluid, organic formations that somehow seemed more alive, more creative. Admiral, Lieutenant Chen reported, we're receiving requests from 17 different consortium species asking for permission to send cultural exchange delegations to Earth and the colonies. Charles smiled, understanding that humanity had achieved something far greater than mere membership in galactic civilization. They had shared the secret that had allowed a species to transform from planet-bound warring factions into star-spanning cooperative civilization in less than a century. The secret wasn't in their technology or their military might or their diplomatic skill. It was in the simple recognition that differences were gifts to be shared rather than problems to be solved, that strength came from diversity rather than uniformity, and that the greatest achievements were possible when beings of intelligence chose cooperation over competition while preserving the unique gifts that each brought to the common endeavor. As New Windsor Station settled into its night cycle, Admiral Charles Thornton looked out at the stars and knew that humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. They had come to the galaxy as students, hopping to learn from ancient civilizations. Instead, they had become teachers, sharing lessons that would reshape the cosmos itself. In the guest quarters, children from Earth and Mars and Luna were already fast asleep, dreaming dreams that would carry the seeds of a new kind of civilization to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. And in those dreams, human and alien voices sang together in harmonies that no single species could have created alone, building bridges of understanding that would span the stars themselves.